I guess that's what you get for trying to change your life. Hopefully I don't need my earphone. I don't know if anyone's here. Sorry about the delay. If anyone is here, you'll note one thing. Not one thing. I don't usually suffer delays. When I'm doing these, this is only the third time doing this like outside live stream, I guess. Let me see if I can raise this bad boy. At the moment, no one's here, so I'll just kind of waffle on here and there and get on my coat. It's actually slightly, very slightly cold this morning in just north of Tokyo. We got, I think, -2, -3 overnight. It's supposed to have -4 pretty soon, which meant that I've had to wrap the water. What is it called? We have a well. It's not a good well. We're not in the countryside. We're just like barely just outside of the city. And basically, I think it's something like 90% of the people in this area are on well water. And in this province or this prefecture, it's I think it's the highest percentage in Japan are actually on well water. So sometimes the well freezes, and I haven't built a little housing around it, but we'll get to that. Now, I got one person watching, whoever you are, thanks. Come in and say hello. Sorry about the delay. There was, I don't even know if you can hear me. If you can hear me, tell me, please. Type something, that'd be nice. But anyway, I was trying to get on the computer or on the StreamYard this morning, and I actually hadn't planned on it. But I've read a whole bunch of stuff this morning that made me think that maybe it's time just to say something, or that I have a couple of words about. I don't have any feedback if there's getting any. How's my mic? All right. Well, hopefully that's working. Anyway, I was reading the news this morning, and I don't mean the news like going to CNN or MSNBC or NHK or I can't remember any of the other websites, but just like typical things, just going through Twitter feeds. And so you get people on this side and that side. Go to Mac Rumors to get some information. I just like to see what's going on in the hardware world there. Go to D Preview to see what's going on in the hardware world there, and not actually sort of just opening my eyes and going outside and listening. And the reason why I say listening is because it's actually been, I think I mentioned this before, it's actually been quite interesting to go outside, especially right after, like almost in synchronization, right after the second wave, whatever you want to call it. The second wave came into the news, etc. Right after, almost maybe perfectly in synchronization with it, suddenly, very suddenly, helicopters will be flying above, almost as if, and it's you cannot just have a helicopter go the moment there's some sort of media coverage. No, it doesn't work exactly like that. The helicopter, you have to get the permits for flying it. You have to schedule a time. There's a whole bunch of strings in the background. Even if you were to, take a historical example, like what is his name? Joseph Hess, I think. He tried to get an airplane to go to England to deliver peace terms. It took him a long time. Eventually, he parachuted his way there and failed. But it's not, you cannot just do that, even when you're not in a war-torn or wartime. But anyway, I called this, what did I call this one? Rising Sea Lifts All Boats, something like that. I think it's, I don't know if it's clever exactly, whether or not that's a clever title or not is exactly something I cannot speak on, because I'm the one that came up with it. But one thing I was really noticing this morning as I looked at Twitter, again, looked at D Preview, and looked at Mac Rumors at the same time, was that the biggest thing, apart from, you have a product announcement for this new thing or that new thing, and, those are always big, especially at product-driven or hardware sites. But the thing that will always be and is always on and probably will be for the foreseeable future, people's minds, is what's happening in the air. And of course, in the air means, the reason why it's in the air is because, if you don't wear a mask, I guess, then the thing goes in the air, droplets or spittle or whatever you want to call it, breathing. Some people, I think they consider that you putting a thing over your face is actually some sort of spellcraft or something. I don't know, maybe. But it's in the air. And the big the big article whose comment section got shut down today at D Preview was about a wedding photographer who went to a wedding in Texas. And at this wedding in Texas, the groom, no one's listening right now, so I'm just kind of talking into the ether, but the groom was infected, evidently, with the C. And he didn't tell anyone, or his wife or his wife-to-be knew, of course. But evidently he didn't inform the photographer. And the photographer went, in good faith. And she was one of the people that's absolutely terrified by this thing. And, that's perfectly fine. I totally understand why anyone would be terrified. I understand why people would not be. I understand all of that. But she went in good faith, and I don't know, I'd have to read the article. I don't actually have Wi-Fi at the moment. Let me see here. Let's see if I can open it up. See if I can go to D Preview. Because it's actually quite an interesting, if I can't, that's all right. I'll just kind of remember it off the top of my head. The MacBook Air is a little bit slow these days. I'm going to try to see if I can get an M1, eventually replace all my computers with an M1. I want something, I want D Preview. That took forever, just not forever. It's not like, comparing an old computer here. Let's see here. D Preview. Looks like Wi-Fi's working here. That's great. All right, the article is called Texas Report Details the Harsh Realities, Risks of Being a Wedding Photographer During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Probably shouldn't have said all that stuff. But anyway, D Preview, by the way, for any of you people who aren't into cameras, is the big, probably the biggest English language photography-based and photography equipment-based hardware site. It's hooked into Amazon, so you can, if you buy something from D Preview, you basically go straight through Amazon links, etc. They do cover other sales venues, but it's basically an Amazon now a subsidiary. It's a website I go to check every single day. Anyway, I'll just kind of read this article, and hopefully someone will come in. If not, well, I'll just kind of waffle on a bit. A recent report out of South Texas reveals the harsh reality of being a wedding photographer in the United States. In an article titled Texas Wedding Photographers Have Seen the Same Beep, shared by Texas Monthly, reporter Emily McCuller tells the story of a wedding photographer who was diagnosed with C after it was revealed the groom of the party had tested positive for C and didn't inform the wedding photographer. The photographer, who remains unnamed through the article, was informed of the groom's positive diagnosis by a bridesmaid in the party, but not before the photographer had spent an hour or two inside the unmasked wedding party taking photographs. The photographer said, "The bridesmaid was looking for me to be like, oh, that's crazy. Like, I was going to agree with her that it was fine." All right. That wasn't the case, though. The photographer suffers from asthma, a serious comorbidity factor that can increase the risk of a positive COVID-19 diagnosis. I didn't say C. Additionally, the photographer has 3 kids and a husband at home that she didn't want to infect should she end up C positive. After discovering the groom's secret, the photographer and her assistant left. Texas Monthly notes her exit was tense. The wedding planner said it was the most unprofessional thing she'd ever seen. Bridesmaids accused her of heartlessly ruining an innocent woman's wedding day. The photographer even recollected a bridesmaid telling her, "I'm a teacher. I have 14 students. If I'm willing to risk it, why aren't you?" Interesting. After leaving, the photographer canceled her Thanksgiving plans with the family, sent her kids to relatives' houses so they wouldn't get sick, and informed the brides of her upcoming weddings that she'd been subcontracting to other shooters, says Texas Monthly. Sure enough, a few days after the wedding, the photographer started feeling symptoms and eventually tested positive for the novel coronavirus. Novel C. Don't say it, man. The photographer said the couple whose wedding she was photographing didn't care about the diagnosis and didn't offer to compensate her for the test, nor did they apologize for getting her sick. The article goes on to point out that this incident is far from an isolated one. As you browse through the hashtag #TexasWedding on Instagram, there are a handful of images that show groups of friends and family celebrating matrimony with what appears to be little regard for protocols suggested for mitigating the spread of C, a disease that's confirmed to have killed over 300,000 individuals in the United States alone. This is getting long. We're almost done, though. The report details statements from other photographers who share the experience trying to shoot weddings throughout the pandemic. A recurring theme is a lack of masks, proper social distancing, and little means of sanitation options, such as hand sanitizer. As for the original wedding photographer, she has recalled a heartbreaking conversation she had with the bridesmaid at the wedding. "I have children," she told the bridesmaid. "What if my children die?" The bridesmaid responded, "I understand, but this is her wedding day." The reporter notes, that not all wedding anecdotes it came across from photographers were as reckless as the featured one, but even in the anecdotes that featured more responsible weddings, nearly half the guests were unmasked, including those who had high-risk factors. While Texas reduced the size of wedding gatherings from 500 to 250 individuals, there's still plenty of risk in having that many individuals together in a single venue. Vaccines are being distributed around the globe, but according to experts on the matter, it will still be a while before anything gets back to normal. Whatever that may look like. And until then, this unfortunate reality is what many wedding photographers and other professionals will have to face as the death toll continues to rise, particularly in the United States. All right, now I got one person watching. Thank you for whoever you are. I hope you can hear something. If you can, just say it. Now, the reason why I want to highlight this article, there's two basic reasons. One is I find this whole thing very interesting. Now, I don't have any sort of hard opinions about, like, okay. Recent in another article, I mentioned that I think this is either a joke, and someone I think asked me if I thought it was a hoax, and I don't think the disease is a hoax. I think that how it's being managed, certainly in light of history, in light of how basic people act, how we as modern individuals expect the world to be, and how we are supposed to blame everything on a single factor. I think it's all in that case. I think it's all a joke, and I think it's a very I think it's a very well orchestrated joke, and I think it's one that's going to have repercussions, perhaps for all time, at least in the modern world. Now, if all that breaks down, then I think there will be repercussions for the modern world as well. But this article, one thing that immediately struck me was, and I wanted to comment, I think I highlighted just one section of the comment, and I just wanted to put it in quotes, and it was, let's see what here, second, let's see, where is it? Right. The photographer suffers from asthma, a serious comorbidity factor that can increase the risk of a positive C diagnosis. Not even in this article, they're not saying can increase the risk of a person dying, can increase the person of getting sick, can increase the person's the chance that they will lose smell for the rest of their lives, this and this and this. They're saying it increases the risk of diagnosis. And there's a couple of really good, I'm going to leave that open because this takes forever to wake back up. There's a couple of very good YouTube channels that I followed for, a little while, who I guess they would be on the sort of truther aspect side of things. One is Quantum of Consciousness, and he, about 6 months ago or 5 months ago, said that eventually people will start talking about numbers, not of the people that, but the people that just get the thing. And there's a stupid thing that people on the right will say, which is, well, of course, if you test more, you're going to get more. And the left will be like, of course you're going to get more if you test more. And they're both arguing the same thing, and they both make sense. They both make sense. Now, if there are more people in the population that have it, and you test more, absolutely that number is going to go up. But let's say the population, let's say 50% of the population has it, okay? You test more, and it just keeps skyrocketing. And if you're worried just about the number of people having it, then you're gonna freak out. But if you're not worried about the people having it, but sort of the downstream effects, then it shouldn't matter at all. And here in this website, or in this article here, they say it right there. It increases the likelihood of diagnosis. So what's the problem here? Is it the disease, or is it the diagnosis? At this point, we have to ask ourselves, is anyone worried about death rates from C? Anyone at all? Why I say this is I stupidly was on Twitter, had a conversation with a lad who was saying that there had been 17 million deaths around the world. And I was like, really? I was a little, that seemed pretty extreme. So I checked it out, and the World Report said it was something like 1.7 million with COVID, or with C. I said the word. And you know, I was like, I just corrected him, and then this was on D preview as well. Stupid. I was not Twitter. Sorry, stupid me. And then he amended his. It was in 5 minutes from the moment that he posted, which means you can still edit your post. And he then re-edited it from 17 million to millions. And then he didn't, you know, put I edited this number or anything like that. I just looked wrong or whatever. And then of course you go to the CDC in America and it says these are numbers with C. They're not numbers from C. They talk about there can be a million mitigating factors that lower that number. That seems like what they're worried about is the number with C. And if you think about it, during a pandemic, no matter how you want to say it, but let's say let us honestly just look at this here. If, for instance, I die today, and let's say also the population, my wife reckons I'm going to do the authority thing here. She's a biologist. She does those PCR tests for her job. She's not really on either side necessarily. She says that you can get, as long as you mix it at a certain speed or long enough or something like that, or short enough, I don't know which one it is. You'll get a positive or whatever. But she doesn't really care about this whole conversation. But she does reckon that around, up to 30% of the population in Japan has it, is what she reckons. And, who knows? Maybe could be more, could be less. But if you keep testing, of course, that number is going to skyrocket. And if all you're worried about is the number of cases, then you're going to be freaked out forever. It doesn't matter if 5 people die. It doesn't matter if 15 million people die. If you're worried about cases and that's the only thing that matters, then you're going to be freaked out. Now, here's where the rising sea lifts all boats comes in. If I die today, and if she's right, 30% of the population in Japan have it, then the chances are that I have it are extremely high. And if I die, let's say, of a car crash, I will be one of those numbers because I will have COVID in my system. I will have C in my system, and I will be a C diagnosed, fatality or whatever you want to call it. So that number will go up not only as a diagnosis, but it will go up as a C with C death. Now, I would like to say that actually would be, in some ways, you could say that it's a from C death. And this is the thing that I don't think a lot of people are sort of focusing on, and I wish that they would. And why is that? And what do I mean? Well, what I mean is this. In this pandemic situation, where you have wedding photographers who are worried about going to do their job because they might get it, not about, now she does mention comorbidity, but the article itself mentions increase of diagnosis, as if the real fear is of being told you have it and having to change your life in some way. Who knows? But if for instance, she's worried about it, the website's worried about it, and by the way, every single comment was basically positive in the orientation that this thing is the worst thing that's happening to our society at the moment, and we have to get past it. If we don't get past it, all hell's going to break loose, or maybe all hell has already broke loose. That has never happened at D Preview. So I have had comments purged here and there from D Preview, very interestingly for very small infractions, and once or twice I have said something that I shouldn't have, absolutely. But every single one of those comments was that way. And the only time that's even possible, there's 89 comments. There's no way that there's a single dissenting comment, or not a single dissenting comment. But this time there was not a single dissenting comment, and the comments were closed. So my guess is that they purged the comments they disagreed with, and all they have left is the comments that support the theory or the article. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But it gets you thinking, if that is the only narrative that's allowed, then there's no way that any death from anything, anywhere, is anything but a C death. What I mean is, let's say suicides do spike, as people on the right are worried about. Suicides spike. Well, guess what? What are they coming from? They're coming from. They're not coming with. They could be completely free of C disease, but they're coming from the C disease, right? Maybe they lost their jobs. Maybe they maybe they can't go to the wedding of a person they love. Maybe they can't attend the funeral of a person they love. Maybe there's just a switch in their head that was already depressed, already stressed out, that just, it was too much. And maybe this pushed them over and they did it. Maybe they did have a car crash. You had a car crash and you have a higher level of stress. You're not driving as carefully. Or maybe the person in front of you, maybe they were coughing and they suddenly were worried about it. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you have an asthma attack, and maybe it's not, you don't have maybe you're one of the 70% or the 50% or 30%, whatever, who don't have it, but you suddenly have a coughing fit and you're worried. And maybe you also have a bad heart, or maybe you're overweight. I would suggest that every single morbidity during this pandemic, every single one is itself from or directly related to this disease. Maybe even a shot. Someone shoots you. Why is that? Or maybe there's some sort of comorbidity. Maybe there's something like what I mean is maybe there's some correlation. So we saw. It's quite interesting. We're demonizing weddings at the moment, demonizing weddings and demonizing funerals. And 6 months ago, people were in their hundreds of thousands and maybe in their millions parading around cities, destroying things with or without masks, doing whatever they wanted in the name of something else. And the media was all for it. The articles that came out were not demonizing the vector, the spread of that. And now, there seems to be a second wave right after all of that is done. After all those riots, etc., are done, whatever you want to call them, protests, after all those are done, there seems to be a second wave. And what is the vector that we're worried about? Weddings. We're worried about the most natural thing, and the thing that not only are people employed to do, but people have been doing for thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, depending how you see the world, could be millions of years. And we're worried about funerals, which are also as old or older than that. But we forget the fact that there were massive riots around the world related to a single event. What does that mean? What does it mean? This is what's got me wondering here. What do we mean when we attribute a disease, when we attribute some sort of historical phenomenon, when we attribute a historical event, when we attribute something in our lives that seems to have changed our lives? What do we mean when we say that thing changed things forever, for me or for this country or for the world, for history, etc.? Because in order to say that, you have to have enough people who believe the same thing. If it's in your case, you have to believe it strongly. And maybe you don't have full knowledge of yourself, but you have to believe it perfectly. But when it comes to history, etc., you have to have enough people to believe the same thing for that thing to become truth. You can't just have a theory, and the theory can't just be some guy waffling on into the air. He has to have some sort of first-hand information. He has to have some sort of connection with the individuals that were important in making this item historically contingent or changing history. You have to have, or I suppose you could say, if you don't have all those things, what you could have eventually is consensus. You could have enough people that sort of believe the same thing, and you come together and you start writing things, and you start making a narrative, whether it's true or factual or not, in sort of any general sense or any universal sense, or even in the specific sense. You have to have enough people to make it a consensus. And once it's a consensus, then what you do is you can basically write whatever you want, and that becomes, I guess you could say, that becomes zeitgeist. That becomes zeitgeist for a period. And it could be a very long period. It could be a period that lasts hundreds of years. It could be a period that lasts thousands. It could be a period that lasts decades. It could be a period that lasts half a decade or a year or so. But you have a consensus. And maybe the consensus will eventually be overturned. We know this. It happens all the time. Consensuses change. Scientific consensuses change. Historical consensuses change. But that doesn't mean that they're right or they're wrong. In 1,000 years, what we think is absolute, locked in proof, scientific proof, could be wrong in 1,000 years. They'll be like, nah, could be wrong in 10 years. And a lot of people do sort of make the fallacy that, science, that I think a lot of lay people will say science says this, and this is, decided science. And Science doesn't say that. Scientists do say that, but at the same time, science does say that, because science doesn't exist without scientists. It's like the tree. If the tree falls over there in the wood and no one's there, does it still make a sound? Well, yeah, I mean, physically it might, maybe, but it doesn't make it doesn't make a sound if there's no instruments to hear it. That's a good question. It'll fall and, it'll hit something. There'll be some sort of echo, but if there's nothing to hear it, there's no animals, if there's nothing else, does it actually make a sound? And when you don't have a competing narrative for anything, then that you have truth from a single perspective. And at the moment, it's quite funny. I was at Mac Rumors just a little bit later on, and Mac Rumors had an article here. Bring it up. There's a war going on between Facebook and Apple. It's quite interesting. Let me see if I can find that right here. It's called "Facebook Runs Second Full-Page Ad Criticizing Apple, Says Opt-in Tracking Will Make the Internet Worse." So this is Facebook, Apple, two massive corporations, I suppose warring in their own way for nothing less than you and me, our focus, both our eye focus, the focus that we have for our wallets, etc. Facebook runs ads that then we purchase. I have actually stupidly, and I may cover that, purchased something that I've seen on an advert in Facebook. Stupid me. And I have Apple product, obviously. So stupid me. But both of them are warring for your and my vision, for our focus, whether through wallets or whatever else. It could be through word of mouth. It's powerful. Whenever there's a war between competing elements, whenever you have people that support them, and people support vociferously, will argue for one side or the other, whether or not that one side or the other is an important entity or not, like whether it's Facebook or Apple. And those are not, in any sort of transcendent sense, they're not important at all. In 100 years, if Apple or Facebook still are around, all they will be is massive or decaying corporations. But there's no humanity in either one of them. Nothing at all. There's nothing. There's no history. There's no culture. There's nothing. They are just massive corporations. But they're warring. And this is on Mac Rumors, an Apple generally positive site, which is saying Facebook has expressed additional criticisms towards Apple over an upcoming iOS 14 privacy measure that will require users to grant permission for their activity to be tracked for personalized advertising purposes. For the second consecutive day, Facebook is running a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post that claims Apple's tracking change will harm not only small business, but the internet as a whole. Facebook says that due to Apple's new policy, many apps and websites will have to start changing subscription fees or add more in-app purchase options to make ends meet, making the internet much more expensive. Now, I have a couple of problems there. Obviously, this is a lie in terms of small businesses. It is pretty expensive to advertise at Facebook. Very, very expensive. Let's say I have a small business. I used to do events. I do product photography, etc., like that. Usually, for me at least, I've generally operated out of a word of mouth principle, and that's how I don't like paying people to advertise my stuff. Now, that may explain a whole bunch of things in my business, etc., but it's something I dislike. However, I have tried Facebook ads before, and they are extremely expensive, and not a single one has ever given me a customer. Not a single one. So what Facebook are saying here essentially is people have been giving us a lot of money, and we have been able to use those adverts and track them through that sort of Facebook comment sections and Facebook connected websites, etc., that allow advertisement from Facebook to go around the web. However, the sort of adverts that you will see in general are not from small businesses. Small businesses can target a small, well, the better they target their clientele, possible clientele, the better they'll get some sort of return. However, I'm not going to just browse the internet, just randomly browse the internet and come across stuff from a small business that I'll want or need. Never. It'll always be from some massive corporation or some Kickstarter or something like that. There's no way that it's going to be like a small tool maker or something like that is going to be able to advertise to a person like me, just, who's just searching the internet. So that's already a lie. That's already a lie. Whatever, you have to ask, what do they consider a small business? Does that mean fewer than 5 people employed? Does that mean a small tool shed? Does that mean a company with 100 people? Does it mean a company that's turning over, say, $10 million in profit, or less than that? Does it mean, you have to ask the question, what does small business mean? And maybe, Facebook, one of the largest corporations in the world, obviously their business model depends on people somehow giving them money through advertising, and maybe some other stuff. I don't know how else it works, but they depend on this. So it's not about, they're not worried about the internet, of course. They don't care about the internet, except as a vector to give them, to funnel them money. And that money comes from, I guess, when you click on their adverts, if their advert works for certain companies, then company will pay more, etc. Back when I first tried at Touch My Apps, we tried Facebook advertising, and they were at first kind of bringing in traffic, but it wasn't at the time cheap. I think we put like a $10 limit per day on it, and that, I think at first it brought in, there were fewer websites, by the way. There were fewer websites that were targeted for the iPhone and toward iPhone gaming and all that, and iPhone applications. There were only like 3 large ones, and we were I think the 3rd largest at the time. And so the number of websites they could actually go to was very small. And we did see, I think, up to around 500 users a day, which was at the time it was significant. It was something like 500, so we had 10,000. We had between 10,000 and 15,000 views a day, or maybe 8,000 to 15,000 views a day. It doesn't sound like a lot right now. At the time, like I said, we were number 3 behind Touch Arcade and what was the other one? Slide to Play. And anyway, so 500 coming in from Facebook was a significant portion. However, that was $10 a day. And how much were we making from a website? People bought apps from us and we got pennies. People bought sort of products that we might have labeled or whatever, got very, pennies a day. I think the biggest paycheck I ever got was $500 for half a year of work. And I was sharing basically profit halfway with my administrator, with Louis. And I mean profit, like he fronted all the costs. He used out of the profit, he fronted all the costs for the website, etc. So that was for a website. So what other sort of business could basically, a small business, let's say whatever small business could sort of support themselves? Not a website. A website couldn't support themselves off of Facebook. No one ever, as far as we could track it, no one ever bought something coming in from Facebook. So that $10 a day, completely gone. So what could we actually sell if we were a different sort of business that money would come back to us after we paid $10 a day for, like, say 100 days to Facebook, so $1,000 to Facebook? Well, what would we have to do? What do people buy in generally? People don't buy very specific things very often. Maybe cups or something like that, but none of that. If we did a profit sharing deal with some sort of company that made cups, they're selling the cup, they're making it, they're putting our label on it, we're getting pennies or whatever. If the agreement was with the cup maker itself, the cup maker that is able to sell a cup for like $2 and do profit sharing, they're not a small business. They're making thousands of cups a day, maybe more than that. They're a massive, there's no compatibility with the word small business and what they do. And I would probably categorically disagree with Facebook here. There's no way that small businesses are, by and large, maybe a wedding photographer, maybe, but even then, we're probably looking at wedding photographers that only deal with big clients and do stuff around the world. I don't think you're going to find a local wedding photographer through Facebook adverts. I don't think you're going to do that. Maybe relatively, maybe it happens sometimes. But in general, you're going to be looking for an internet connected business, and it's not going to be something that itself is probably making anything, and it's not going to be something that I don't think it's going to help. It's not going to help the website. It's not going to do anything like that. So I categorically disagree with Facebook here. This is now what Facebook is saying. Apple plans to roll out a forced software update that will change the internet as we know it for the worse. Take your favorite cooking sites or sports blogs. Most are free because they show advertisements. Apple's changes will limit their ability to run personalized ads. To make ends meet, many will have to start charging you subscription fees or adding more in-app purchases, making the internet much more expensive and reducing high-quality free content. Beyond hurting apps and websites, many in the small business community say this change will be devastating for them too, at a time when they face enormous challenges. They need to be able to effectively reach the people most interested in their products and services to grow. 44% of small to medium businesses started or increased their usage of personalized ads on social media during the pandemic, according to a new Deloitte study. Without personalized ads, Facebook data shows that the average small business advertiser stands to see a cut of over 60% in their sales for every dollar they spend. Wait, so what does that mean? So their sales based on the money that they pay Facebook will go down. But why would Facebook, if Apple are limiting tracking in the app, and that's what's the thing, Facebook, it's not face. Okay, let's say there's a small business, a photographer, and let's say they actually do get returns from Facebook. All right, so they spend, let's say they spend $1,000 to Facebook in a 3 or 4 months span. Now, a wedding photographer is going to get between a cheap one, $1,000, a better one around 5,000 for a wedding. Now, so let's say they do, I don't know, in a 3-month period, maybe they do 20 to 25 weddings, and they get a fair amount of their money. But let's just think about this relatively realistically. How many of those weddings are actually going to come in through Facebook? How much of their income is going to come through Facebook? Facebook are worried that 60% of, reduced by 60%, see a cut of over 60% in their sales for every dollar they spend. And that means spend on Facebook advertisements. So if you're spending $1,000 on Facebook, and let's say you got 2 weddings that came in because of Facebook, you're going to see a reduction in that, and that $1,000 went to earn you, say, up to 10 grand. Okay, so you're going to see a reduction by one wedding basically, or one wedding in like a quarter, something like that. And so for you, that would be the reduction. You spent 1,000, you got back 5,000. It's a very good investment. However, you're not the norm. Most of your businesses, there's no way that your business is coming through Facebook. There's no way. Not most of your business. So let's say, you lost $5,000 over the year because you lost, or over that season, because the Facebook is no longer able to track people. But what Facebook are not telling you, and of course it's completely obvious to everyone here, is that they want to be able to make sure that you, the viewer, and that are seeing adverts from as many people as possible. Now, preferably adverts that people have paid a lot of money for, but even the targeted ones, they want you to see stuff that kind of is adjacent to your interest. And the photographer then hopes that they'll get money back for it. But Facebook really hope that the photographer will come back, because their business depends on the photographer spending $1,000 every 3 months. And if you get 1,000 photographers spending $1,000 every 3 months, that's $1 million right there every 3 months. And there's probably quite a few photographers that are spending that much money. Now, if they didn't spend that money, could they earn an extra wedding via other means? That's a good question. And there's the other question is, will the internet get worse if we don't have ad tracking? Well, it is possible that some websites will put up paywalls. It is possible that some websites will have loads and loads of more untargeted adverts, more like the early or the late 90s and the early 2000s. And whether or not that's a positive thing is really, or a negative thing, is really quite up to you and quite up to me. Do we use the internet more then? Do we use it less? What do we use it for? What is the importance of internet? Is all of, like, are the websites that we go to see these advertisements, are they important to our well-being? Maybe, maybe not. Are they news? Maybe, maybe not. The news has got way more adverts than ever before, of course, and you get their Facebook tracking and all that. So you'll get more targeted ads for sure when you watch the news. But what if the news itself is, in its own way, a type of advertisement? What I mean is this. Like, we have, probably everyone that has their eyes open, or even has done the smallest bit of reading, knows that it's a very small portion of corporations that cover the news across most of the free world. I think I've heard it's as few as 6 major corporations, and possibly even like 10 individuals that basically are in control of most of the news around the free world, or the capitalistic world. And that itself, you have a certain amount of competition between those companies, right? You've got CNN don't want you to go to NBC, NBC don't want you to go to Fox, Fox don't want you to go to ABC, etc. But they're all versions of the same thing. Not a single one of these massive corporations, not a single one is going to say, you know what, this Enlightenment project, I think it might be wrong. In fact, I think that maybe the whole idea that we had to take down the kings was a bad idea. In fact, we have an ownership system from a foreigner who's owning business, quote unquote, a private American business, quote unquote, that's giving us news from a slant that isn't necessarily helping the American people or the Swedish people or the Canadian people. You got six corporations controlling all of this sort of advertising via the news, deciding which news gets you, deciding which slant to give you on the news, deciding what liberal spin, and I don't mean liberal like liberal versus conservative, I mean liberal like Enlightenment, which Enlightenment spin to put on the news, and how to approach anything that comes up in the world, even if the thing that comes up in the world is the product and the problem of the Enlightenment or the current zeitgeist. So all of it works within a frame, which is like, well, you and I are products of the news, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, there are people that have been talking about this for newspapers, for publications, for editorials, or about them for hundreds of years. Countries all over the world. They talk about the lying press, they talk about distortions, they talk about the press not agreeing with what the people on the street think. Then eventually, when you have enough of a thing repeated, that thing becomes true. A lie repeated becomes truth. This is true. Absolutely. That's why, and maybe that's one of the reasons perhaps that science changes. You have the truth in the 1950s about a thing, a scientific thing, and it's like, all right, that's truth. Science said it, it's true. In the 70s, they're like, actually, we found out that it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more nuanced, you know. We're gonna have to add this, we're gonna have to throw that out. But for those 30 years or those 25 years or whatever, 20 years, that thing was true because it was repeated. Whatever it was, I don't care what it is. That thing becomes true because you've spoken it long enough. And it's not just a thing for the lay people. Scientists get it too. My wife was telling me about a thing. It was called the stop cell thing. There was some sort of regenerative cell that was going to, and I don't remember how it was taken out. It was like you damage a cell in a certain way and then it will regenerate itself. And this was like a big scientific thing. And of course, this is one of the, what do they call those? Not flaws. It was one of the things that was caught eventually by journals, but it was caught immediately. And that was really nice. So it got what could have been a sort of a big meandering wrong way for science. It caught it immediately and made sure that no one went farther. But for at least 2 or 3 weeks, that was really on the news. And it was down, I think, in University of Tokyo or something like, or Tokyo University, something like that. And I think it was the person that was in charge, the gentleman that was in charge of the lab, I think he committed suicide, or the girl who discovered the stop cell thing committed suicide, something like that. But there's this constant push. Now, I know people say that science is science, and it's clear, it's beyond ideology. Science looks for truth in the physical world. Maybe it does. But it also, and this is absolutely true, and people on the right mention it, they don't understand how it basically indicts everything, that a lot of what they think is important. It indicts a lot of what they think is important. But science is driven by money, absolutely. So why is it that she was so keen on making this discovery? Well, because then she'd get publications, she would be able to further her research in the future, get more grants, etc. The lab would get the same thing, and all of this is actually real. All of this is real. It doesn't matter if a company or a scientific lab or whatever is actually doing something that's wrong, that's on the wrong path, as long as they demonstrate some sort of truth, or they demonstrate some sort of importance, and as long as there's funding for that sort of thing, they will get it. Absolutely, they will get it, and they will be published, and that will become true as long as it's true. If it's proved in the future, either 2 weeks from now or 20 years from now or 200 years from now to be false or to not be completely true, then the truth changes. But for those 20 years, it will be repeated. This is the discovery. This is how it's changed things. This is how we operate life now. That it just becomes true. There's no other way to look at it. You can say science is blind, science doesn't have an angle, etc. But yeah, so even science is that way. When it comes to media, when you have 6 people controlling everything, they're going to even filter science. So you can say, yeah, but they want the biggest profit margins, etc. But it works the same way. If you have a profit motivated market in any system, truth no longer matters. It doesn't. So maybe the truth is that it's better for all of us to be fit and to eat balanced meals in a more traditional sense. What immediately is in your surroundings that you can get from the land, whether that's meat, vegetables, all that, but the mix of what's around you and what's available to you. If you can eat that in a way to feel full and still be able to do your work, if that's a balanced meal, like a real balanced meal, a more traditional or natural balanced meal, if that's the meal, who's going to profit off of that? If you're getting your stuff from the locality, who's going to profit on that? Maybe the local markets, maybe a local farmer, right? But that isn't the case. Every single the other part to that is, if you are trying to be healthy, you have to use your body. And I did mention burpees in this thing. I'm not in good health. I'm not overweight. I'm in the median, whatever. But I have not been using my body for over a year. I used to get up at 5 a.m. and do around 1,200 to 1,600 calorie burn on my bicycle every morning, and then do push-ups. It's not the greatest workout. I know that. I could have been doing like some serious strenuous stuff and then the bicycle and had muscles that by themselves just burned fat. I don't. I've always been kind of a guy that likes to build up lean muscle, and maybe that's a problem. But when you have a society that decides that physical health is really important, what do they mean by that? So do they, by physical health, mean you shouldn't eat more than this sort of calories per day? Well, yeah, that's right. You shouldn't have too many calories, probably. Do they mean we want to allow you to have as much medication to suppress this sort of reaction to certain foods? Do we want to allow you to have good access to hospitals so that when you have reaction, that you have some sort of recourse? Do they mean, or do they mean something like this? We want you to be as physically fit as possible, so there should be no obese people. You should spend an hour, if you're not doing heavy work for your job, and even if you're doing heavy work for your job, you should also do stretching, and you should do some sort of strength exercise. Should there be some sort of minimum assumption about how healthy, physically fit, etc. that people are, and where they get their food? Or should it be top-down dictated, basically 20% battery? All right, 20% battery. Or should it be top-down dictated that none of that matters, and all that matters is sort of medication? The thing is, if you have a profit-derived system, what happens is that there's no possible way that the physically fit body and the locally sourced food, meat, vegetables, whatever it is going to rise to the top. There's no way. Absolutely gone. So any sort of ideology that's promoting physical health through being physically fit on your own, maybe in your school could be like that. Maybe it's some sort of social thing, but it's not part of some, like, don't join this diet plan. Don't join this pharmaceutical, group. Like, if it's medicine-based, medicine's going to make you healthy. Hospitals are going to make you healthy. That's a big industry. If it's hospitals are connected to the pharmaceuticals. They're connected to the companies that supply pharmaceuticals with their components. They're connected to universities. If all it is medical system will keep you healthy, that's supporting a giant industry that you don't even see and can't even understand. So if you say medical is the most important thing, you are basically incentivizing at that moment a huge industry that you don't see that also works for profit. All of it. And all of those companies are competing for profit. They're competing to bring out the best product that then aligns itself with the zeitgeist of the day. So whatever the media is going to tell you, whatever the science who's supported by this and that are going to tell you, that's going to be the truth. And the other truth is that you shouldn't be, and this you can see from any, you can look at a Gulag, you can look at local advertising, you can look at anything. You want to buy. And the people that put out advertisements are the people that have enough money to advertise. We have a local vegetable place here called Kinoko Farm, and they sell, it's small. I don't know how many people they supply, but they have mushrooms, which is kinoko. They have onions, they've got eggs, they've got peppers, and they're basically a farmer's market for this area. And if you go there, you're going to find that they have one single advertisement that I know, and it's in a free newspaper for the city. But we buy from there as much as possible. However, in our mailbox, we get adverts and flyers from all sorts of supermarkets all over the area. Now, those supermarkets are big chains that had millions, possibly billions of dollars. And they have thousands of employees. And I haven't seen a Facebook advert from them, but basically I do everything in English, and this is Japan. So I would imagine that something exists like that. The sort of advertisement that's going to filter down through the internet to you is not from a small company. It's not from a local farmer's place. And that farmer's place, they're supporting people that work with their hands to harvest their stuff. They're not supporting, some rocking chair guy that does computers. They're not supporting a guy that live streams. They're not supporting anything like that, all right? So what are we supporting? Facebook are saying that they're worried about the little guy. They're not. They're worried about people paying them money, and they're worried about being able to know what people are buying and what people are interested in, so that they can then, I guess, work with credit card and payment processors and all that. They're worried about their profit margin. Whenever a big company says they're worried about little guy, they're lying every single time. Every single time. If a big company were honest, they would say, we're actually not doing it for you. We're doing it to stay alive ourselves. And what we need is this and this and this. And we need these sort of advertisements, and we need these sort of incentives to keep our business alive. Whether or not that business is good for you. Now, the next thing you have to sort of look at is if Facebook went down today, how would the world change? There are some businesses that do rely probably on Facebook. I think Way Rates is one. Their advertisements come through Facebook, and then once you sign up and I stupidly bought something from them. Yes, I'm an idiot, all right? But there are some businesses absolutely that do work on that. But there was a world before Facebook. This is like the old. You talk with someone who's just a materialist. So they're like, "So are you communist or a capitalist?" And you're like, "I'm neither. I don't really like either." But they're like, or if they say, "So you don't like capitalism?" I'm like, "No, not really." So why do you like communism? I'm not. I don't like communism. Was like, but if you don't like capitalism, you have to like communism. I'm like, no, I don't agree with either one. I don't agree with either one. They're like, what are you, some hippie? I'm like, no, I'm not a hippie. I'm not a hippie. I just realized there's a world that existed, a way of living that existed before communism and capitalism. There's a world that existed before Facebook. There's a world, in fact, that existed before Google. How did we do things before then? How did we do things? How did you learn new stuff? How did you learn new stuff? Yeah, maybe from a newspaper, sure. Maybe from friends. And how did you hang out? Was it different? There was a world before that. And why are we trying to support Facebook? Yes, people will lose businesses if Facebook goes down. But guess what? There was a world before that, and people were working before that and making ends meet. They were also probably working in a world that wasn't as expensive, and they weren't buying as many superfluous things. And they weren't being told that they had to buy this thing. They weren't being told by as many sources in order to reiterate something that they want to be known as truth, a certain narrative. Because once you're on the internet, that narrative is going to be hammered into you so many times that whether or not every single death comes from this C thing or not, that's the only thing on the brain. And if you're terribly afraid of this, and you know what? Fine. Maybe you should be. But the reason why you're terribly afraid of it is because all you see is that from a camera website now, we're getting filtered comments because people are disagreeing. Maybe people are disagreeing with a certain narrative, and their comments are being purged. And the only ones that are allowed to stay are the ones that are for it. And what are we for now? What are we for? We're now this global community. Global community. What's the only thing we're talking about? We're talking about the C thing, right? We're not talking about None of us are talking about, none of us in the mainstream, no one that's able to have a voice in any sort of public platform, nowhere, because there's no profit motive for it, are able to say, you need to get fit. You need to do, I don't know, 20 or 50 or 100 burpees a day to get your legs strong. You need to do some lifting. You need to be able to burn calories. Your core morbidities, which are your obesity and the fact you can't breathe because you're fat, that stuff, you can't talk about that. Why? Because the things that got those people fat and got them obese are the things that people are selling, that support Facebook. Facebook have adverts for Klondike bars. They got adverts for fast food. They got adverts for everything like that. And you're going to be bombarded by that. And then you're going to be like, oh, well, you look at the calories. Well, it's only this, but you're not looking at the lifestyle. And then there's like, we got to worry about global warming and plastic. Plastic, we got too much plastic in the world. Well, you're buying too much plastic. You're buying junk food. But you can't indict junk food. And even if you indict junk food, the only people that would indict it in the modernist sense will be like, what we have to do is have a new type of diet. A new diet that is not traditional. So less this, less that, more this, more that. And you know what? It doesn't coincide to what brought up the human race. Nothing. It's completely opposite to it. And if that diet makes people fatter, lazier, not able to do as much exercise, you're going to get more problems. And you're going to get stupider people. A strong body makes a strong mind. A strong mind makes a strong spirit. If you have a strong mind, you can reject stupid things that you hear. If you have a strong body, you can build a strong mind. If you have a strong mind and a strong body, the spirit that knows what's important is allowed to flourish. The spirit that's like, those trees are an extension of the earth. My people are an extension of the earth. Once you understand that, then you can reject all this nonsense. However, everything that's being incentivized, everything that you see on internet, everything that has an advertisement, everything is coming from a place that wants money. And anything that wants money replaces anything that knows what is healthy. Because if anything has survived this long, that's still saying no to capitalism, to the profit motive, it alone has probably been there, and you can look at it. You can look through history, and they'll try to discount it, has been there before, and it's existed. And if it has existed for thousands of years, and still exists within certain populations, and still is trying to make a comeback, that is real. That's it. I need to go get a battery, guys. If you'll give me about 5 minutes, I'm going to go try to find a battery because my phone is running out of battery. Vlad, good to have you. And I'm just going to see if my daughter's up. If not, if she is, I'll come back and I'll say, got to end this. But can you give me just 5 minutes? Vlad, good to have you. Please stay there for just a second. Be right back. That was a little bit less than 5 minutes. Still got 2 people here. Hey, let's see if this charges. If it doesn't charge, then I'm just gonna we'll have to how do I check? Let's see. Oh, it's charging. Okay, good. We'll just see how long this lasts. All right. Let's see here. Maybe Wi-Fi. Your stream quality is a little low. Yeah, my Wi-Fi doesn't come out here, and I'm in a small Japanese house. If I do this inside, it's a little bit too loud. So yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, let's see. Right, that's it. Yeah. So anyway, okay, Vlad, I'm not sure how long you've been here. I've basically been doing a screed against sort of advertising. about possibly the fact that maybe all of us have C, and that every single death, whether or not it's directly related to C, is itself a death attributed to or with or whatever C. And the reason why I was saying that is because if you have a thing repeated enough times, and by the way, if I'm indicting advertisement here, I'm indicting everything. So media, everything. If you have a world that so relies on advertisement advertisement, I'm not going to just say like you see a thing, you want to buy it, but something that advertises itself either as true or as notable or as something that you need to, right, you just came a couple of minutes ago, or you need to pay attention to. If you have that sort of advertisement, and that could be media, that can be, it can be things that people say, your kids, what kids say, it can be what your friends say, things that are repeated. I'm going to say that that's advertisement. But the biggest forms of advertisement, of course, are the methods that control the airwaves. And the airwaves are all controlled by, as I was mentioning, something like 6 corporations control 90% of all media in the free world, at least in the free world, by the way, in the Western world, and certainly in the English world, something like 6 corporations. And I think they have their fingers also connected in the Asian world. I don't know about in South America or anything like that, but it's probably very similar, because wherever the money is, that's where monopoly flows. Like basically, people want to be part of something larger. And that's just, you'll always trust something that's larger. That's just the way it is. It's why people on the quote unquote dissident right now say the cathedral, which I think is itself a problem, but the cathedral used to sort of dictate what was true and what was not through the church. Now, the cathedral, quote unquote, I don't want to say cathedral, let's just call it what it is, the synagogue. What is controlled through the synagogue is the airwaves. And the airwaves are they're the media. The media is a synagogue, absolutely. And the media then tells you what science is important to listen to. And then science itself is, of course, beholden to the profit motive, who's supporting it. Research is often done through government grants, and government grants and support private companies that support this and that you think are on the right or the left. Doesn't matter. It's all lies, is what I'm saying. And at this point, if somebody's telling you that the way to be healthy is to rely on this medication or to wait for that injection or whatever, there may be some sort of truth into it. There may be some sort of truth in that. But if they're not also telling you what is allowed all of the healthy people and all the people throughout, everyone before you, you're not an atom. You're not an atomized individual. You have a father, a mother. You have a grandfather. You have, on down through the lines. If you didn't exist, then maybe truth that's stuff that's said that's false doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. Tree that falls in the wood, if no one's there, does it not make sound, or doesn't make sound? But whatever was true that allowed all of those people to survive, live, thrive, be prosperous in terms of bring up their own fruit, bring up their children, and build society and make things safe in how they consider things safe, that itself is true. And what I mean by what allowed them, I don't mean like what was true when your father was young and then what was true when your grandfather was young, if they're different. The things that were the same when your father was young, when your grandfather was young, on through the ages, those things that survived, that were considered true then, those things are true today. And none of them are take an injection and get your medicine. They are to be healthy, you eat what your ancestors ate, right? What allowed those societies to survive and the sort of life that allowed them to thrive. If you cannot look at a society where 60% of the population is obese. You cannot consider that healthy. There's nothing healthy about that. How can we take any truth from a society that's obese? Is there any truth that comes from a society that incentivizes people to get fat, who cannot breathe, who have asthma, where asthma may or may not have existed in the past? We have no way to test that. Who don't allow A/B testing and don't even have a method to A/B test. So, for instance, vaccines stopped these diseases in the past. Did they? Maybe. maybe, but how would you test? How would you test? Well, this society in this other country right now has this epidemic, and they don't have the vaccine. That's why. Well, but okay, a couple of things. Did the look at the death vector? Did the vaccine fix the deaths, or did something else fix the deaths? Did the disease either run its course? Did it get herd immunity? Did some sort of did the sort of communicable deaths or diseases that killed a lot of people in the past, were they mitigated through maybe better sanitation? Were they mitigated through, like a whole bunch of things? When people started congregating in cities early on, cities were they were dirty, absolutely dirty. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, Vlad. I'm not sure how things are locally for you. However, it seems that most people are incentivizing the wrong thing, or at least speaking about a patch for health. I wish we in the US would pay as much attention to our diets and exercise as yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, none of us understand in any way what is truly preventative, right? There's no way for any of us to. The only thing, and I would suggest the only thing that's really fair and good to look at, again, is literally the past. And I don't mean we should all be farmers. However, the first thing a country should do is support its own people. All of your food should first be eaten by the people in your country. Let's see. I'll have to call that person back. But yeah, it's rubbish to think that you should produce food and sell it abroad. If you got land and you have people starving, and I'm not a communist, I'm not a modernist, but if you have people starving, why do you have people starving? It's a profit motive. The profit motive moves all of your land production, all your agriculture abroad, or it sells the stuff that you make abroad for profit. The profit motive will never allow your land to be used by people who need to feed themselves, ever. It will make it more and more difficult for those people to actually do something. It'll make it more difficult for small farmers to, and I don't mean this in a hand-to-mouth way. It'll make it impossible for people to have a subsistence market. Impossible. In any way, shape, or form. There's no way you can have a subsistence market when there is a profit motive. So that could be subsistence at a country level. So whatever we make, our population is going to eat. If we have surplus, that's when we can sell it, or we can store it, and we can save it for a rainy day. Like that will always be trumped. So that's why in Canada you have massive cornfields. And where's it going? Where's this corn going? It's not even the corn that people eat. Corn is going for biodiesel. And why is it going to biodiesel? Because there's a million reasons why we have cars, why we live so far away from each other, why we commute all this way to work. Blah, 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 blah. It goes on forever. But you can answer a high-level question or a low-level question. You're never gonna get some sort of answer that makes sense in the middle, ever. And if the incentive isn't get your people healthy, get them to understand how to survive, then it's wrong. It's an untruth, is basically what I'm saying. So let's see. I hope we get through this and are serious and seriously consider our healthcare, at least from a holistic perspective. That's tough, man. I would say that any modern country, and by the way, I got to go in about 10 minutes. Any modern country is not going to be able to attack health in any holistic manner. So I live in Japan, which is 97% Japanese. By the way, 20 years ago, it was like 99%. So the number of non-Japanese foreigners has gone up in 20 years. You're like, oh, it's only up 2%. But that 2% is actually literally up from 100% to 300%, something like that. I don't know how you the jump from 1% to, it was actually, so that let me see. When I was originally here in 1999, I think that the number of non-blood related people in Japan, so people that have, say, their fathers are Japanese and they married a Brazilian, something like that. So those people are visible minorities, but they have connection to Japan. They were something like 0.5% of the population, and the absolute non-connected foreigner was 0.5%. So a person like myself, non-connected to Japan in any way, is now 3%. So that's a jump of between 4 times and 6 times, which is insane. Insane. And if you follow that in 10 years, that 3% will be at the same rate. That'll be 1%. It'll be at least 6. It'll probably be more like 7, possibly around 10%. In 20 years, we're looking at 30%, if not much more than that. And in fact, by that time, you basically have Japan that works like Sweden, that works like America, any country that has that much people who have no relation to the culture, the people, the land, etc. You're gonna have, all you're gonna have left is a profit motive. That's it, because there's no connection between anyone here, or I don't mean here. In Japan, though, it's already messed up. You've got a foreign constitution, you've got a capitalist system that was basically imposed on it. Either don't, if you want to count it from William Perry or you want to count it from World War II, doesn't matter. It's imposed on it, and Japan is no longer running things the way it wanted to. I mean, the way it naturally did and wanted to. And Japan is a beautiful country. However, all modern Japan is extremely ugly. Extremely ugly. The houses, the modern houses, are a weird amalgamation of Western style houses, but tiny, and they look like they're made out of Legos. They look plastic. I mean, the cities are very poorly laid out. All the modern buildings look like every modern building in the world. They don't look Japanese in any way. So it's the country, and I would say the country being the thing that the Japanese people built up and still value inside themselves, is beautiful. But none of that, you're not going to see a lot of that. It's mostly gone. But let's say in 20 years, when Japan is 30% foreign, it's going to even be less connected. And so there's not going to be, even now when you have its media controlled by foreigners, essentially, and its banking controlled by foreigners, you still have a large Japanese population that still value a certain amount of things, even though most of it's been stripped away or filtered away after the war, for sure. But you still have some sort of cohesion. But it's not going to be that way in 20 years. And in fact, by then, it's just going to be like America is, where it's just competing corporations telling you what's true. And then you're connected to this group, and this group believes in that. And then you're just going to cleave to one corporate truth or another. And that's it. There's no way you can prioritize health that way. I mean, already, if you consider 100 years ago, the average Japanese was a farmer. A farmer who works his body all day long is going to have a body that's in shape and is firm. And the modern Japanese, I mean, you see these guys, they marry anime dolls, they marry anime characters. What you think of a soy boy in America, that's like a Chad compared to a Japanese soy boy. Japan's being destroyed by modernity, and it's destroying everywhere. But I mean, the stark contrast here is insane. And you're getting a rise in obesity. We have people around in this area who are obese, and it's just products. Everything's convenience store. Everything, yes, you get more products, but it's the advertising is always going to work against you. It's always going to make you less healthy. It's always going to destroy your social cohesion. It's always going to do all of that. So Facebook saying that they want to help small business, one, is wrong. Two, the small business that they think a small business are probably internationally oriented or maybe very successful small businesses. They're worried about the profit motive, but they're warring with Apple, another company that don't care about anything. They're supposed to be American. They're definitely not American. And all these corporations are basically, well, as we know, Amazon made like 13 billion in a single day because of this C thing. And now we're tying everything back to this C thing. Whether or not you think it's a hoax or not, everything's coming back to this singular point. Like this is, what's the word? This is a singularity right here. All deaths, I'm saying all deaths are attributed to that thing. Every single one. And the reason is because when you have all the truth coming from those 6 corporations, all this advertising, repeating the same thing over and over, the only thing on your brain is that thing. So if you get the sniffles, you're going to think it's that. And the stress level that's going to just make you drive worse, make you make poor decisions, make you spend on this or not spend on that, make you do a bad garden, a good garden, possibly, make your asthma worse, etc. All of that is going to be affected, or it's going to affect your health. All of it. So I would say, I'm technically, I guess you could consider me sort of right wing. I think the right wing should take up the banner of all deaths are C deaths. And the reason is because we're listening to the wrong people, because we are basically putting ourselves under the influence of all these sort of magician people that want us to think in a special way. But the way they want to think, if you go back to the center of it, is to basically buy their product. And that's it. We're not buying the product that our ancestors made, which was life. The reason why we're here is because our ancestors chose life instead of choosing product. And that's it. But my wife's coming back, and I gotta like log out. If you got anything left to say, I'm just gonna finish my coffee. That was how I was gonna rant there, dude. They're all made so much money. It's insane. Yeah, isn't it insane? They're all crying about some sort of disease and how it's gonna affect everyone, and not a single one of those people. Like, even I disagree with the money, their mouth. They're gonna be like, we gotta support this vaccine. We gotta do that. We gotta do all these hospitals. Yeah, okay. Why don't you give all that money, or not give? That's a bad way to do it. Build everything that you say that we don't have. Do it. Use all that money, Mr. What's his name? The guy from Amazon, Bezos. Use all that money and make the hospitals you need, make the networks you need to distribute your medicine. No, I think that's wrong. I think it's a stupid way to do it. Relying on medicine is the worst way to develop health in a population. However, if you're worried about that, all that money which you made from this thing has to go to that. And if you're not doing that, you are a liar. You're not. You even from a left wing or a right wing perspective, you're a liar and you're a thief. So stop it. And if you're not gonna do what you say is important, then you are a liar and you should be replaced. Is essentially, yeah. What's this? Loved your video on the like of 50. Oh, you liked it. Okay, cool. That is a great lens. So I don't know if you saw my recent video on Christmas light bouquet with a whole bunch of 50 millimeter. I'm going to take this inside. There's a whole bunch of 50 millimeter lenses. I don't know if you saw that. They were all for a Canon EF mount. So obviously that lens can't be compared because it wouldn't work on a Canon 5D Mark IV or a Canon 5D or anything like that. However, let's see, what time is it? Wow, it's after 10. Insane. I may be pulled away just a second. That lens, it doesn't have the best build quality for sure, as you saw me say in the article or in the video. But that lens has one of the nicest bokehs ever. And in fact, of all the semi-fast, like f2 lenses, f2 50 millimeter lenses, of all those, it's by far my favorite. However, if I add a 1.4 lens into the mix, my favorite bokeh of all time is coming from the Zeiss Planner 50 1.4. It's a manual focus lens that was released for Nikon, I think Pentax, maybe for Sigma as well as for Canon, and I have it in the Canon mount. Problem with that lens is it's insanely hard to focus wide open through a DSLR or through a mirrorless, and that is because it glows. It also focus shifts, and the DSLR focus is going to try to focus at f2.8, so that's not going to work out. And if you do with mirrorless, 1.4 is going to glow, and so it's still going to create troubles. And I find no real difference in focusing wide open with a DSLR or a mirrorless for that camera. So anyway, looks like my daughter's trying to get some breakfast, so I'm just going to probably try to do that. See here, just got my first Leica, the M9. Nice. Ooh, the mono. Very, very, very nice. Why don't you, I'll try to do a stream or something about that later, and I'd like to hear how that's working out for you. So yeah, I'm just going to have to sign off here. So thank you very much for listening to my screed or rant or whatever. And just know that my stance on this is both the left wing and the right wing are approaching this wrong. Health should be the most important thing. We're not focusing on health. Health comes from within. It doesn't come from without. And if we're focusing on without, we're just becoming weaker. So anyway, see you guys. Bye.